Hey guys, what's going on? My name's Rye Goes Pop, and today I'm doing another collection of my horror movies I got on DVD or Blu-ray. So let's begin. Starting as usual, the top shelf. So I have a free movie action thrill pack, in which I'm only going to highlight World War Z. So do not ask me about Super 8 or Deep Impact. I just don't see them as horror enough. Next up is the Halloween Horror 5-film collection, which has The Exorcist, the remakes of both Friday the 13th and Texas Chainsaw, Hidden, and the main series of It, followed by the 8-movie horror classics, which has The Faculty, From Dusk Till Dawn, Immortality, Castle Freak, Reflecting Skin, Subspecies, The Prophecy, and Dracula 2000. Next up is the 15 big box of horror movies, which has The Inflicted, Occupied, Dire Wolf, Killer, Summer School, Meadowwoods, Howling 4, Killjoy, Familiar, The Nurse, Blind Witness, The Cry, Bleak, and the 2 Prom Night films. Followed by 28 Days Later, The ABCs of Death. That movie is just bizarre as hell. Come on. Next up is the Alien 6-film pack, followed by, come on, get it out. Alien vs. Predator double feature pack, American Psycho, a classic, Army of Darkness Screwhead Edition, The Babadook, The Banishing, Behind the Mask, Black Friday, The Black Phone, Blood Quantum, Bodies Bodies, The Burning, The Brain, Cabin in the Woods, one of my favorite horror movie, one of my personal favorite. Ooh, what's this? Let's get this out of the way. Followed by the Candyman 2-film pack, which has the original and the requel. Next up is the Carrie 3-film pack and the 2-film pack with the remake. The entire Chucky saga, Christmas Blade Christmas, insane Christmas horror film on Shudder, The Collector, The Collection, The Conjuring Universe, Countdown, Critters 4-film collection, Dead Silence, Deep Blue Sea Trilogy, Demonic Toys 3-film pack, in which it only has, in which I'm going to highlight both Demonic Toys and Dollman versus Demonic Toys. Well, so do not ask me about Dollman, that's not horror. Next up is the Dennis 2-film pack, Doctor Sleep and The Shining, Here's Johnny, Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness, Don't Breathe 2-film pack, Escape Room 2-film pack, The Evil Dead on a Steelbook, Evil Dead 2, Final Destination 5-film collection, the original Firestarter, and the remake, followed by the Friday the 13th 8-film collection. Second shelf. Okay, I have the Friday the 13th remake, which is the Killer Cut, Fright Night, the Funhouse Massacre. I heard it's very good. Ghostbusters 3-film collection, which has the first 2 films and Afterlife, 2014's Godzilla, and the Godzilla and Kong 3-film pack. A 2-film pack with Goonies and Gremlins, in which I'm only going to highlight Gremlins, so don't ask me about the Goonies. Next up is Gremlins 2. Next up is Halloween, one of my favorite franchises. After that, I have Halloween 2 and 3. Then 4, followed by 5, followed by Curse, H2O, and Resurrection, the remake by Rob Zombie, which is unrated, and the sequel, 2018, followed by Halloween Kills, and Ends. Hellboy, Hellboy 2, The Golden Army, and the reboot, Hellfest, Hellraiser 6-film collection, which has Hellraisers 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8, Hide and Seek with Robert De Niro, Hostels 1, 2, and Hostel 3, followed by I Know What You Did Last Summer 3-film pack, which has I Know What You Did Last Summer, I Still Know What You Did Last Summer, and the god-awful I'll Always Know What You Did Last Summer. That movie, highly don't recommend that one. The modern adaptation of The Invisible Man by Lee Winnell, the Insidious 4-film collection, because there's a 5th film coming, It 2-film pack, Jaws. And all the sequels, and I do enjoy Jaws 2, haven't seen Jaws 3, and I'm very, very disappointed in Jaws The Revenge. Next up is Jeepers Creepers 1, 2, and Jeepers Creepers 3. Again, everyone doesn't talk about these movies anymore because of the director, but I enjoy them. and the reboot Jeepers Creepers Reborn. I've seen it. Next up is the Jordan Peele Free Film Collection, which is basically Nope, Us, and Get Out. The Jurassic World Collection, which has basically Jurassic Park all the way to Jurassic World Dominion. Followed by the Killjoy Trilogy, Killer Clowns from Outer Space, the King Kong Triple Feature Pack, Krampus, fun Christmas horror movie, The Lair, Leprechaun 8 Film Pack, Let Me In, starring Chloe Grace Moretz, and the Lost Boys Trilogy. Third shelf. Ugh. Okay, first shelf. I have the Meg, Mimic Trilogy, Morbius. It's Morbin time. Mortal Kombat Triple Feature Pack, and the 2021 reboot on Ultra 4K. My Bloody Valentine and My Bloody Valentine 3D, followed by the Nightmare on Elm Street 8 Film Pack, and the Awful and the 2010 reboot, in which I am not a fan of it because Freddy looks way too burned realistically. Followed by M. Night Shyamalan 4 Film Pack, which is basically Old, The Visit, Splitting Glass. I've seen Old, and it was very, very good. And it was very good, honestly. Next up is Old Man, starring Stephen Lang, a.k.a. Norman Nordstrom from Don't Breathe. Followed by Pearl, the prequel to X. Pet Sematary 2 Film Pack, which is basically the original and the remake. Phantasm 5 Film Collection. Pieces. Followed by the Poltergeist 3 Film Collection and the remake. Predator 4 Film Collection. Followed by The Purge and The Purge Anarchy. Election Year and The First Purge, and The Forever Purge. Followed by the Puppet Master 9 Film Collection and Lilith Wright. Prisoners of the Ghostland starring Nicolas Cage. PG Psycho Gorman, one of my favorites from Shudder. The classic Psycho. A Quiet Place. And the sequel. Followed by the Resident Evil 6 Film Collection and Welcome to Raccoon City. Followed by the Rocky Horror Picture Show, a classic. Followed by Rob Zombie's Firefly Trilogy, which is basically House of a Thousand Corpses, The Devil's Rejects, and Free from Hell. Rosemary's Baby, a masterpiece. Saw 9 Film Collection because Saw 10 is on its way to cinemas in October. Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark. Scary Movie 1, 2, and 3. Next up is Scream 3 Film Pack, which is basically Scream, Scream 2, and Scream 3. Now, Scream is one of my other favorite franchises. Next up is Scream 4. Uh-oh. Hang on. I'll fix it. And Scream 5. Or 5 Cream, as people would say. Next up is Shaun of the Dead. Good horror comedy movie. Strangers 2 Film Pack. Stephen King 4 Film Pack, which is basically the Dead Zone, Pet Sematary, Silver Bullet, and Graveyard Shift. I've watched Graveyard Shift. I've watched and Graveyard Shift. Now, I did see Graveyard Shift, and it was actually very good. Next up is Smile. Really scared by that. Slashback, and the classic Sleepy Hollow by Tim Burton. So yeah, I did see Stephen King's Graveyard Shift, and it was actually very terrifying. Next up is Silent Hill, and the sequel, Revelations. Silent Night, Deadly Night Part 1, followed by Silent Night, Deadly Nights 3, 4, and 5, and the Loose remake from 2012. Studio 666, starring the Foo Fighters. Love the band. Next up is Spawn. Spiral, the Shudder film, not the Saw film. Huge difference. Followed by Terrifier and Terrifier 2. Terror Times 10 collection, which is basically Cabin in the Woods, It Follows, You're Next, The Possession, Cabin Fever, The Last Exorcism, Sinister, The Haunting Connecticut, Leatherface, and The Descent. Followed by Terror Train, the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre, the remake, prequel to the remake, and 2013. Next up is They Live in the Gray, Tremor 7 Film Collection, Trick or Treat, classic Halloween movie, Unbreakable. I actually have this movie on Blu-ray, so yeah, that's a good movie. Next up is Underwater, the Underworld 5 Film Collection, starring Kate Beckinsale, followed by Unfriended, and its sequel, Unfriended Dark Web, followed by the Universal Classics Monsters Collection, which is basically Dracula, Frankenstein, Wolfman, The Invisible Man, The Mummy, and The Bride of Frankenstein, followed by Urban Legend, one of my favorites. Urban Legends, Final Cut, and Bloody Mary. I am very, very shocked by this. Followed by Van Helsing, starring Hugh Jackman and Kate Beckinsale, who was also in Underworld, very obvious. Next up is the Venom 2 film pack with Venom and Venom Let There Be Carnage. Next up is VHS 2 and 94. Next up is Wes Craven. Next up is the Wes Craven collection, which is basically the Dracula trilogy. Well, Dracula 2000 to be more specific. Next up is Willy's Wonderland, starring Nicolas Cage. But hey, the Finest and Greatest movie is happening, so yeah. Next up is the Wishmaster 2 film pack, followed by Wolf Creek. I've not seen Wolf Creek 2, and I've not seen the show on Shudder, so I heard it's discontinued. Followed by X and Zombieland. Okay, next up is the box. Won't be long until I get on our shelf. So let me go ahead and take some of these movies out. So they don't fall. Oh, come on. There we go. Now, let's begin. Okay, I have House of Wax, so I'm going to assume that this is the remake. Yeah, definitely the remake. Followed by an 8 Midnight Horror collection, which is basically Wages of Sin, Backwoods Bloodbath, Curse of the Wolf, Hell's Highway, Abbott Conscience, Mr. Halloween Sheltered, and for some reason, Puppet Master Free. Followed by Death Proof, part of Grindhouse, and made by Quentin Tarantino. Love the guy. Next up is Happy Death Day 2. Paranormal Activity, Next of Kin. Would love to get the art films. Followed by the insanely popular Megan. I've heard everyone's been talking about it. Next up is the Mummy Ultimate Collection, starring Brendan Fraser and The Rock. Followed by Wrong Turn 5, Bloodline. The Curse. The Blair Witch Project. I need to watch this movie. Next up is the original Children of the Corn by Stephen King. And Rest Stop. Okay, next up is Glorious, a Shudder film starring J.K. Simmons. That's the reason I bought it. Now let's take some these movies out. Next up is Creepshow, followed by Shudder. Nope. Next up is the Midnight Collection, which is basically a bunch of low-budget crap, namely Haunted from Within, Doll Graveyard, Watch Me, Fear Chamber, Deadfall Trail, Zombie Dearest, Demonic Toys 2, and Evil Bong 2, King Bong. I've not watched it, but that movie is just bonkers. No pun intended. Next up is Stay Alive. You die in the video game, you die in real life. Followed by Unrest, The Grave Dancers, The Abandoned. Yeah, you can see a trend going. Next up is The Nightmare Man. So yeah, this is probably 8 films to die for, so I might get 2 more. Okay, let's take some of these movies out. Oh, sorry. I think we can start from here. Next up, we have The Ruins, followed by The Depths of Ian Stone, Dark Ride, The Sixth Sense, a classic. I mean, it has Bruce Willis and Haley Joel Osment. You know, Sora from Kingdom Hearts. Next up is Season of the Witch, starring Nicolas Cage and Ron Perlman, a.k.a. Hellboy himself. Next up is Anaconda. I heard that movie was insanely good. I mean, Ice Cube really took the stand against the snake. Next up is Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter. Yeah, I might watch this on a specific day. Maybe like on his birthday, I don't know. Next up is Wrong Turn 4, Bloody Beginnings. And The Puppet Masters. Not to be confused with the Puppet Master movie series, but this is the one made by Disney. Next up is the Omen Collection, which is basically the first 3 films and the remake. Next up is Mandy, starring Nicolas Cage, and The Killing Gene. Following that, let's get these 4. Next up are Crawl, The Menu, starring Ralph Fiennes and Anna Taylor-Joy. Next up is Reanimator, based on the novel by H.P. Lovecraft. And I gotta say, I haven't seen it yet, but I heard it's good. Next up is Maximum Overdrive, based on the short story by Stephen King. Okay, next up is the Species Quadrilogy. You have Species, Species 2, Free, and The Awakening. Okay, next up I have Pretty Dead 10-film horror film collection, which is basically The Sacred, Bunny Man, The Lights, Backwater, Monsters in the Woods, Pelled Sparrow, The Lake on Clinton Road, and Occupied. Next up is Frogs, Storm Warning, The Belko Experiment. I have the movie on Blu-ray, but I decided to get the version on DVD. Next up is Shredder, Slapface, and Wishmaster. Next up is the Butterfly Effect 2-film pack, starring Ashton Kutcher in the first film, followed by Do You Want to Know a Secret? I heard this movie has Joseph Lawrence, aka Matthew Lawrence's brother. Next up is What Lies Beneath, starring Harrison Ford and Michelle Pfeiffer. Slayers. Let's get these two out. Next up is Bloodstone, Subspecies 2. And Sasquatch, starring Lance Henriksen. I need to watch that movie. Okay, next up is Mandrake. Not seen it yet. Followed by Hellraiser, because I prefer the original over the reboot. 1408. Followed by Wrong Turns 1, 2. The Witch or The Vitch, followed by Donnie Darko, and Hellbound Hellraiser 2. So yeah, unpopular opinion. I prefer the first eight Hellraiser films over the other two sequels and the reboot. That's just my opinion. So don't tag me. Next up is Better Watch Out, a good Australian Christmas horror film. The Skeleton Key, starring Kate Hudson and John Hurt. Steel Trap, and The Barge People. Okay, let's take some of these movies out. Okay, I have the Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2. I can probably put it in there after this video. Followed by Wishmaster Free, Tucker and Dale vs. Evil, The Ninth Gate, starring Johnny Depp, and Fatale, starring Mike Coulter, aka Luke Cage. Okay, next up is Jason X. That's where Jason Voorhees goes into space. The Cellar, The Skulls Free, and Anacondas, The Hunt for the Blood Orchid. I also have the Blade 4-film pack. So yeah, this is the way I have to get all 3 movies. And it does have the 1 season of House of Chiton. That's how I pronounce his name. Sorry if I butchered that. Next up is the god-awful Slender Man movie. I'm glad I did a review on that piece of garbage. I mean, on that abomination. Next up is Amityville 3D, followed by Creepshow Free, Vacancy, starring Luke Wilson, Freaky. Now we take some of the Blu-rays out of the box. Okay, I have Ghost Ship, followed by The Slumber Party Massacre, Pray for the Devil, and The Bye Bye Man. I've watched it and I'm very, very, very surprised by it. Okay, next up are The Fang by John Carpenter, Train to Busan, good. I heard it's a good South Korean horror movie, and the reboot of Child's Play. Now, let's take some of these movies out next. Yeah. Okay, next up is Nature of the Beast with Eric Roberts and Lance Henriksen. I enjoy it, but I hate the guy, Victor. Next up is Cube. I really want to get the R2 films because the second film has Neil Crone, aka Gordon and Diesel 10. Next up are Skulls 1 and 2, Sorority Row, a fun slasher. Blumhouse's Fantasy Island. Now, I've not seen the TV show, but I heard this movie is quite bonkers. Next up is the classic George A. Romero's Night of the Living Dead. Next up are the remake of Amityville Horror, the Prophecy 5-film collection with the first 3 starring Christopher Walken, M. Night Shyamalan's Signs, S. Donnie Darko, A Donnie Darko Tale, the original Amityville Horror. Unpopular opinion, I prefer the original over the remake, so yeah. Next up is Phantom of the Opera, a classic. Now let's get the other films out. Okay, I have 976 Evil by Freddy Krueger himself, Robert Englund, The Gallows, Silence of the Lambs, Wrong Turn Free, The Crazies, and Fear.com. Not an actual website. Next up are the Dark Obsessions 4-film collection, which is basically The Boy Next Door, Curve, Endless Love, and Fear. Followed by Creature from the Black Lagoon, and Jason Goes to Hell, The Final Friday. Well, not really, because there's Jason X and that crossover in Reboot. Next up is Vacancy 2, The First Cut. The Pumpkin Carver. Malignant. Bram Stoker's Dracula by Francis Ford Coppola. Followed by Hatching. The Requiem. The Invitation. And finally, followed by Creepshow. Another Midnight Horror Collection, which is basically Hoboken Hollow, The Clown, Room Very Free, and Curtains. Oh, wait. So, yeah, basically Hoboken Hollow, Secrets of the Clown, Room Very Free, and Curtains. Kane and See No Evil. And finally, Love and Monsters. And I think that's about it for his big collection of horror movies. Well, that will be all for this video. Well, until I get Brightburn, All Hallows Eve, and the Toxic Avenger quadrilogy on my birthday. Until then, guys, I'll see. Until then, okay, guys. So that's all my movies in this collection video. I hope you enjoyed it. Which is your favorite movie in the collection? Leave your comments below, and I'll see y'all next time. Goodbye, you guys. Peace. Be good people.